You were once a completely different person. That person laughed. That person cried. That person learned to recognize your mother's face, felt the world for the first time, and lived through thousands of moments that mattered enormously. You have no access to any of it. Not one memory survives. Why? Think about that for a second. You can remember what you had for breakfast 3 days ago. You can remember a conversation from last spring. But the years that shaped you the most, the years when your brain was absorbing more information per second than at any other point in your life, are a total blank. Somewhere between the ages of 2 and 4, a curtain falls. Everything before it disappears. Scientists call this childhood amnesia, and for over a century, nobody could fully explain it. Sigmund Freud was the first to name it, back in the early 1900s. He noticed that adults could rarely recall anything from before age 5 or 6, and he assumed it was psychological. He believed the mind was actively repressing early memories, burying them because they were tied to instincts and impulses too uncomfortable to keep in conscious view. It was a compelling theory. It was also, as it turns out, mostly wrong. The real explanation is stranger, and it is written directly into the architecture of your growing brain. Here's what was actually happening inside your skull during those forgotten years. Your hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for forming long-term memories, was still under construction. Not damaged, not dormant. Under construction, the way a building is under construction, with scaffolding still up and wiring still being run through the walls. A memory doesn't just happen the moment you experience something. It has to be encoded, then stored, then later retrieved. In early childhood, the encoding works. Toddlers absolutely form memories. Ask a 3-year-old about their birthday party from 2 weeks ago, and they will tell you, often in vivid detail. The problem isn't creating the memory. The problem is keeping it. This is where the story gets genuinely fascinating. In 2014, neuroscientist Paul Franklin at the University of Toronto ran a series of experiments on infant mice, and what he found reshaped how scientists understand this whole process. During early development, the hippocampus is producing new neurons at an extraordinary rate, a process called neurogenesis. New neurons are wonderful for learning. They are terrible for keeping old memories intact. As fresh neurons wire themselves into existing circuits, they physically disrupt the connections holding earlier memories in place. Franklin's team found that when they slowed neurogenesis in young mice, the animals retained memories for much longer than expected. When they sped up neurogenesis in older mice, the opposite happened. Memories that should have stuck around instead faded fast. In other words, your brain wasn't malfunctioning when it forgot your second birthday. It was doing exactly what a rapidly developing brain is supposed to do. It was rewiring itself so aggressively, so productively, that the wiring itself became the reason nothing from that period survived intact. But neurogenesis is only half the puzzle. The other half has to do with something you didn't have yet at age 2. Language. Psychologist Carol Peterson at Memorial University of Newfoundland has spent decades studying how children talk about their earliest memories. In one long-running study, she interviewed children about memorable events, then checked back with them years later to see what stuck. What she found was that a memory's survival depended heavily on whether the child had the words to describe it at the time it happened. A toddler can feel scared of a dog. A toddler can feel the joy of a beach vacation. But without the linguistic scaffolding to organize that experience into a narrative, with a beginning, a middle, and an end, the memory has nowhere stable to live. It floats, unanchored, and eventually dissolves. This is why your earliest surviving memories tend to cluster around age 3.5 to 4, right around when language explodes and children start constructing actual stories about their lives. Before that point, experience was rich, but it wasn't yet organized into the kind of narrative structure your adult brain needs to file something away for the long term. There's a third piece to this, and it comes from developmental psychologist Patricia Bauer at Emory University, who has spent her career mapping exactly how children build the capacity for autobiographical memory. Bauer's research shows that remembering your own life isn't a switch that flips on. It's a skill built gradually, piece by piece. Young children need to develop a sense of self that persists through time before they can meaningfully store memories about that self. You cannot remember something happening to you until your brain has a stable, continuous concept of who you actually are. That sense of a continuous self doesn't fully mature until well into the preschool years, right alongside language and right alongside the slowing of neurogenesis. So three systems were maturing at once: your sense of self, your ability to put experience into language, and the physical stability of your hippocampal wiring. Until all three came online together, nothing had a real chance of sticking. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. This is an ancient history for your brain. It's still doing something similar to you right now, just on a smaller scale. Every single day, your hippocampus is producing new neurons, just at a far slower rate than it did when you were 2. Every single day, some of your less reinforced memories are quietly being pruned to make room for new learning. You are not the same continuously accumulating archive you imagine yourself to be. You are constantly being rewritten. The version of you sitting here right now has already lost thousands of ordinary moments from last year that felt completely unforgettable at the time. A conversation, a meal, an afternoon that seemed, in the moment, like it mattered. Elizabeth Loftus, one of the most influential memory researchers alive, has spent her career demonstrating something even more disorienting than simple forgetting. Human memory doesn't just fade, it reconstructs. Every time you recall something, your brain doesn't play back a recording. It rebuilds the memory from fragments, and in the process, it can subtly distort details, merge separate events, or absorb information you encountered afterward. The memory you have of your 5th birthday party might not even be a real memory anymore. It might be a memory of a photograph you saw later, or a story your parents told you so many times that it became indistinguishable from something you actually witnessed. So the forgetting of infancy isn't a strange exception to how memory works. It's the most extreme version of something that never stops happening to you. Think about that the next time you scroll back through old photos and feel a flicker of nostalgia for a moment you're certain you remember. You might be remembering the photograph, not the moment. There's something almost comforting hidden inside all of this, though. The reason you can't remember being a baby isn't a flaw. It's evidence that your brain was doing exactly what it needed to do, building itself as fast as it possibly could, tearing down old scaffolding to make room for new circuitry, trading a handful of early memories for the capacity to eventually hold millions more. Your amnesia is a byproduct of construction, not decay. You were once a completely different person, living through moments that mattered enormously, and none of it survived. But that's not a loss. That's the price your brain paid to become capable of remembering anything at all.